The trail ahead disappeared into a curtain of mist, the dense Washington forest closing in around us like the walls of a living cathedral. I adjusted my pack, feeling the familiar ache in my shoulders from 6 hours of hiking, and checked the GPS on my phone again. "Guys, I think we might be off trail," I called back to my friends who were a few yards behind me, catching their breath at the base of the steep incline we'd just conquered. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." "You think, Ethan?" Mark replied, his voice thick with sarcasm. "We haven't seen a trail marker in over an hour." I wiped the sweat from my forehead and squinted at the screen of my phone. The All Trails app showed our little blue dot a good half-mile away from where the Cascade Ridge Trail should be. Not catastrophic, but not great either, especially with dusk approaching. "My name's Ethan Cooper. 3 days ago, my life was normal. I was just a 28-year-old outdoor equipment retailer from Seattle who liked weekend hikes with friends. Now I'm not sure I'll ever set foot in the wilderness again. Not after what we saw, not after what chased us, but I'm getting ahead of myself." There were 4 of us on the trip. Me, my best friend since college, Mark Winters, his girlfriend Ali Chen, and my younger sister Jessica. We'd planned a 3-day backcountry hike through the North Cascades, a challenging but manageable route we'd done variations of before. The weather forecast had been perfect. Clear skies, temperatures in the mid-60s, light wind. Ideal hiking conditions for late September. Jessica approached me, her face flushed from exertion, but her eyes bright with that unquenchable enthusiasm that sometimes made me forget she was already 25, not the pigtailed kid who used to follow me around. "So we're lost?" she asked, reaching for her water bottle. "Not lost," I corrected, "just temporarily disoriented." Ali joined us, adjusting her red beanie over her short black hair. At 5'2", she was the smallest of our group, but what she lacked in height, she made up for in outdoor experience. She'd been hiking these mountains since she was a kid. "Let me see," she said, taking my phone and studying the map. If we keep heading northeast, we should intersect with the main trail again in about a mile." She glanced up at the darkening sky. "But we should probably make camp soon. I don't like the look of those clouds." I followed her gaze. The forecast hadn't mentioned rain, but dark clouds were gathering over the distant peaks. Up here in the mountains, weather could change. "In an instant." "Ali's right," Mark said, hauling himself up from the fallen log where he'd been resting. At 6'4", with a runner's lean build, he was usually the fittest of us all, but today he seemed unusually tired. "Let's find a decent spot to set up camp." We continued northeast, the terrain growing more challenging as we moved away from the established trail. The underbrush was thicker here, the ground strewn with hidden obstacles that threatened to twist an ankle if you weren't careful. The air grew colder as the sun dipped lower, and an eerie silence settled over the forest. "It's so quiet," Jessica remarked, her voice hushed as if afraid to disturb something. "Where are all the birds?" She was right. The usual chorus of birdsong that accompanied our hikes was noticeably absent. No chipmunks darted across our path, no squirrels chattered from the branches above. Just the sound of our boots on the soft earth and our increasingly labored breathing, probably a predator in the area. Ali suggested. "Bear or cougar?" "That's comforting," Mark muttered. About 30 minutes later, we stumbled upon a small clearing, relatively flat and sheltered by a cluster of massive Douglas firs. A small stream gurgled nearby, providing a convenient water source. "This'll work," I said, dropping my pack with relief. "Let's set up before it gets any darker." We worked efficiently, falling into our usual roles, Mark and I tackling the tents, while Ali set up the portable stove and Jessica collected filtered water from the stream. By the time we'd finished, the forest was wrapped in the deep blue of twilight, the first stars appearing overhead. As we huddled around the small camping stove, warming our hands and waiting for our freeze-dried meals to rehydrate, That's strange. Silence still hung over the clearing. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Did you see that report last week? Jessica asked suddenly, her voice cutting through my thoughts. About those hikers near Mount Baker who claimed they saw a SASQUATCH. Mark groaned. Not Bigfoot stories again. I thought you outgrew that phase. Jessica rolled her eyes. It wasn't. Just some random sighting. They had photographs, blurry but still, and recordings of sounds that wildlife experts couldn't identify. There's always some new Bigfoot sighting in these mountains, Mark said dismissively. Never any real evidence. Actually, Ali chimed in, the native tribes of this region have stories about tall, hairy forest beings going back thousands of years. The Lummi call them Tsimikwes. The stories are remarkably consistent across different tribes that had little contact with each other. I raised an eyebrow at her. Don't tell me you believe in Bigfoot too. Ali shrugged. I'm just saying there's a lot of wilderness out here, millions of acres that humans rarely set foot in. Is it so impossible that an undiscovered primate species could exist? Yes, Mark said firmly, with trail cameras, satellites, and thousands of hikers with smartphones, something that big couldn't stay hidden. Unless it doesn't want to be found, Jessica countered. Maybe they're intelligent enough to avoid us. The conversation might have continued, but a sudden noise from the darkness beyond our camp brought it to an abrupt halt. A cracking sound, like a massive branch breaking under significant weight, followed by what I can only describe as a low, rumbling breath. We all froze, our dinners forgotten. What was that? Jessica whispered, her eyes wide. Probably just a deer, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Mark reached for the large hunting knife he always carried on these trips. That didn't sound like any deer I've ever heard. Ali had gone completely still, her head tilted slightly, as if listening intently. It's big, whatever it is, she murmured. Another crack, closer this time, followed by the distinct sound of heavy footfalls moving away from our camp. Then silence again. We waited, hardly daring to breathe, but the forest remained quiet. After several tense minutes, we collectively exhaled. Well, that was dramatic, Mark said with a forced laugh, though I noticed he kept the knife close at hand. We finished our meals in relative silence, the earlier conversation forgotten. As we prepared for bed, I double-checked that our food was properly secured in bear canisters and placed away from the tents. Whatever had been moving around out there, I didn't want to attract it to our sleeping area. Night, everyone, I called. As we retreated to our respective tents, Mark and Ali in one, Jessica and me in the other. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, listening to Jessica's steady breathing beside me and the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees outside. That strange silence still permeated the forest. No owls hooting, no small creatures scurrying in the underbrush. Just an unnatural stillness that kept me on edge. I must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing I knew, Jessica was shaking me awake. "Ethan," she hissed, her fingers digging into my shoulder. "Listen!" I blinked groggily, disoriented in the darkness of the tent. "What? What time is it?" "Around 3 a.m. Listen." I held my breath, straining my ears. At first, I heard nothing. Then in the distance, a sound I'd never heard before. A long, mournful vocalization that started low and rose in pitch before tapering off. It was neither human nor any animal I could identify. "What the hell is that?" I whispered. "I don't know," Jessica replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But it's been going on for about 10 minutes. It's moving closer." I sat up, fully awake now. The call came again, definitely closer than before, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large, moving through the forest. Heavy footsteps, branches snapping, the rustle of displaced foliage, a beam of light cut across our tent, a flashlight from Mark and Ali's tent. "Ethan, Jess." Mark's voice pitched low but urgent. "You guys hearing this?" "Yeah," I called back softly. Any idea what it is? No, but it's big. Ali thinks we should stay in the tents, make no sudden moves. The sound came again, even closer, followed by what I can only describe as heavy breathing, deep, resonant inhalations and exhalations that suggested massive lungs. Jessica clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Ethan, I'm scared. I reached for my phone, hesitating only a moment before switching on the video camera. If this was some kind of animal, I at least wanted to document it. Plus, if things went badly, I hoped the footage would survive to tell our story. What are you doing? Jessica whispered frantically. Recording, I replied, just in case. The movements outside grew closer, more deliberate. Whatever it was now at the edge of our camp. I positioned my phone to record through the small mesh window of our tent, the screen showing nothing but darkness. I switched on the phone's flashlight function, immediately regretting it as the beam cut through the night. For a split second, the light illuminated a massive shape moving between the trees, something tall, bulky, and covered in what appeared to be dark hair or fur. Then it was gone, moving with surprising speed and silence for its size. Did you see that? Jessica gasped. Before I could answer, a new sound reached us, a rhythmic snuffling like something smelling the air. It was investigating our camp. The food, I realized with a jolt of panic. We stored it by the big log. The creature was now directly between our tents and where we'd stashed our bear canisters. We were effectively cut off from our food supply and the trail back. The snuffling grew louder, followed by the sound of plastic being manipulated. It was examining our bear canisters. Stay absolutely still. Ali's voice floated over from the other tent, barely audible. No sudden movements or loud noises. We complied, hardly daring to breathe, as the creature continued to investigate our camp. My phone was still recording, though in the darkness it was capturing little more than audio. I wasn't sure if I should risk using the light again. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the sounds of movement began to recede. The creature, apparently losing interest in our food containers, was moving away from camp. I allowed myself to relax, slightly, until Jessica gasped beside me. "Ethan, look," she whispered, pointing through the tent's mesh window. In the dim, pre-dawn light, I could just make out a massive figure settling onto the ground about 50 yards from our camp. It leaned back against a large boulder, its outline unmistakably humanoid despite its enormous size. As my eyes adjusted to the faint light, details became clearer. Broad shoulders, a barreled chest, powerful limbs covered in what appeared to be thick, dark hair. "Oh my God," I breathed. It's a SASQUATCH," Jessica finished, her voice a mix of terror and awe. "It's a freaking SASQUATCH." The creature appeared to be making itself comfortable, adjusting its position against the boulder. Its movements were deliberate, almost human-like. After settling, its massive head drooped forward slightly. I think it's going to sleep," I whispered incredulously. "It's sleeping in the open. Just like that?" Jessica's voice was skeptical. "Maybe it feels safe here. Maybe there aren't any predators that can threaten something that size." We watched in stunned silence as the creature's breathing grew deeper and more regular. Occasional soft rumbling sounds, almost like snores, drifted across to our tent. "We need to document this," I said, my initial fear giving way to a journalist's instinct. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, actual clear footage of a SASQUATCH. "Are you insane?" Jessica hissed. "That thing could tear us apart." "It's sleeping," I reasoned, "and it's far enough away that I can film it without getting too close. This could be the evidence that proves they actually exist." I sent a text to Mark. "Can you see it, the SASQUATCH? It's sleeping against the boulder." His reply came seconds later. "Yes, don't even think about getting closer, Ethan. Too late." My mind was already made up. Slowly, carefully, I unzipped the tent, cringing at each small sound the zipper made. The creature didn't stir. "Ethan, don't," Jessica pleaded, grabbing my arm. I gently removed her hand. "I'll be careful. I'm just going to get a bit closer to get better footage. I'll stay downwind." Before she could protest further, I slipped out of the tent. The pre-dawn air was cold against my face, my breath forming small clouds as I exhaled, moving with exaggerated care, placing each foot deliberately to avoid twigs or anything that might make noise. I began to edge closer to the sleeping giant. 20 yards from our tent, I paused behind a large tree, my heart hammering in my chest. The creature was still there, its massive form now more clearly visible in the growing light. I estimated it was at least 8 feet tall, though it was difficult to tell exactly with it in a seated position. Its fur, a deep reddish-brown, covered its entire body except for the face, which had a more leathery appearance. Its facial features were a disturbing mix of human and ape. A broad, flat nose, heavy brow ridge, and a mouth that seemed almost too wide for its face. I raised my phone, making sure the video was still recording, and zoomed in, as much as the camera would allow. Despite the dim light, the image was clearer than I dared hope. This would be indisputable evidence. As I fumbled with the zoom function, trying to frame the shot better, a notification sound chimed loudly from my phone. I'd forgotten to silence it after texting Mark. The creature's eyes snapped open. For a horrifying moment, our gazes locked, my terrified human eyes meeting intelligent amber irises set in that not-quite-human face. Time seemed to freeze as we stared at each other, mutual shock evident in our expressions. Then the Sasquatch moved, unfolding from its seated position with astonishing speed for something so massive. Standing at its full height, it towered over me, at least 9 feet tall with shoulders twice as broad as mine. A smell hit me then, a powerful musky odor that made my eyes water. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move as the creature took a step toward me. A low, rumbling sound emerged from its chest, rising in volume and intensity until it became a roar that seemed to shake the very ground beneath my feet. That sound broke my paralysis. I turned and ran, my phone still clutched in my hand, recording wildly as I sprinted back toward the campsite. Behind me, I could hear the Sasquatch crashing through the underbrush in pursuit. "Run!" I screamed as I burst into the clearing. "It's awake! Run!" Mark and Allie were already outside their tent, wide-eyed with alarm. Jessica emerged from our tent, still pulling on her boots. "What did you do?" Mark shouted, but there was no good time to explain. The Sasquatch burst into the clearing behind me, its roar now a continuous, terrifying sound that seemed to fill the entire forest. Even in the midst of my panic, some detached part of my brain noted the creature's speed and agility. It moved like an Olympic athlete, not the shambling monster of pop culture. "Leave the gear!" Allie yelled, grabbing her small emergency pack. "Head for the trail!" We needed no further encouragement. Abandoning our campsite, we fled into the forest, crashing through underbrush, with none of the caution we normally exercised on the trail. The Sasquatch followed, its massive strides allowing it to gain on us despite our head start. "Split up!" Mark shouted over his shoulder. "It can't chase all of us." It was sound logic, but I couldn't bear the thought of Jessica facing that thing alone. "Stay together," I countermanded. "Head for the ravine we passed yesterday." I remembered. A steep, rocky descent that had been challenging enough for us to navigate carefully with hiking poles. A creature that size might have trouble following, or at least be slowed down. The ravine was about a quarter-mile ahead, but in our panic and the poor light, I wasn't sure we were running in the right direction. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but the sounds of pursuit drove me forward. "There!" Allie pointed ahead, where the ground began to drop away sharply. We'd found the ravine, but as we approached the edge, ready to scramble down as fast as we safely could, the crashing sounds behind us suddenly stopped. The Sasquatch's roars ceased, replaced by that eerie silence we'd noticed the day before. We paused at the ravine's edge, gasping for breath, listening intently. Did we lose it? Jessica panted, her face pale in the growing dawn light. "I don't know," I said, scanning the forest behind us. Nothing moved among the trees. "We keep going," Mark decided, already starting to make his way down the steep slope. "Even if it stopped chasing us, I'm not taking any chances." We descended as quickly as we dared, half climbing, half sliding down the rocky face of the ravine. At the bottom, a small stream gurgled among moss-covered rocks, leading away to the east. "If we follow this downstream, it should eventually join. Up with the main river valley," Ali said, consulting her map. "There's a ranger station about 6 miles from here." 6 miles. In our current state, exhausted and without most of our gear, it seemed an impossible distance. But the alternative, going back, was unthinkable. As we began to make our way along the stream, I suddenly remembered my phone. Incredibly, I'd kept hold of it through our mad dash. Stopping to catch my breath, I checked to see if it was still recording. It was. And when I quickly rewound the footage to check what it had captured, my heart nearly stopped. There, on the small screen, was the clearest footage of a Sasquatch ever recorded. Its massive form, its intelligent eyes, its terrifying speed as it chased us through the forest. The evidence was undeniable. "Guys!" I called, my voice shaking. "You need to see this!" They gathered around, their expressions changing from fear to amazement as they watched the video. "Holy shit," Mark breathed. "It's real. It's actually real." "We need to get this to someone who can authenticate it," Ali said, "a biologist or wildlife expert." Jessica nodded, her earlier fear now mixed with excitement. "This changes everything, doesn't it? Scientific proof of Sasquatch." I was about to agree when a sound from above made us all freeze. A rock clattered down the ravine wall, followed by another. We looked up to see a massive shadow looming at the top of the ridge, silhouetted against the dawn sky. The Sasquatch had found us, and it wasn't alone. 2 more massive figures had joined it, their shapes unmistakable even in the half-light. They stood side by side, looking down at us with what I can only describe as calculated interest. "Oh God," Jessica whispered, "there are more of them." As we stared up in horror, the first Sasquatch, the one I'd awakened, did something none of us expected. It pointed directly at me, then at the phone in my hand. The gesture was unmistakably deliberate, unmistakably intelligent. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold morning air. It understood. It knew we had evidence. "Run," Mark said softly. "Run now." We turned and fled downstream, the sounds of massive bodies descending the ravine wall behind us, driving us forward with renewed terror. The chase had only just begun, and now we weren't dealing with just one Sasquatch, but 3. As the morning light filtered through the trees, illuminating our desperate flight, one thought kept pounding through my head with each frantic heartbeat. If we made it out of these mountains alive, nothing would ever be the same again. Not for us, not for science, not for the world. And if we didn't make it out, well then the truth would die with us, buried in these ancient forests that had kept their secrets for thousands of years. I clutched my phone tighter as we ran, determined that whatever happened, this evidence would survive. The world needed to know. They were real. They were intelligent, and right now they were hunting us. The stream bed offered our only hope, a natural pathway through the rugged terrain as we fled downstream, the sounds of massive bodies crashing through the forest. Behind us, my lungs burned with each desperate breath, and Jessica stumbled beside me, her face a mask of terror. "They're herding us," Ali gasped as we rounded a bend in the ravine. "Not chasing, directing." She was right. The 3 Sasquatches weren't using their full speed. They'd appear on ridgelines above us, cut us off when we tried to climb out of the ravine, but never quite closed the distance. They were driving us somewhere. "The ranger station," Mark panted. "We have to reach it." A deafening vocalization echoed through the canyon, a complex series of whoops and howls that seemed to bounce off the rock walls around us. Moments later, answering calls came from ahead. "There are more of them," Jessica whispered, her voice breaking. I checked my phone, still recording, battery at 42%. The footage would be our only chance of being believed if we survived this. The ravine widened into a small valley, and suddenly we had nowhere to run. 5 massive figures blocked our path, standing in a loose semicircle. Behind us, the 3 that had been following closed in. We were surrounded. "Nobody move," Ali breathed. "No sudden movements." The largest of the creatures, at least 9 feet tall with a silvery grey streak in its reddish fur, stepped forward. The one I'd awakened earlier moved to stand beside it, making that same deliberate pointing gesture toward my phone. The larger one extended its hand, palm up. "It wants the phone," Mark realized. "No way." I clutched it tighter. "This is proof." The lead Sasquatch took another step forward, its amber eyes fixed on mine with an intelligence that was undeniable. It made a sound, not a roar or howl, but something that almost resembled speech, a series of modulated grunts and clicks. "I think it's trying to communicate," Ali whispered. The creature pointed again at my phone, then swept its massive arm to indicate the forest around us, then back, at itself and the others of its kind. The message seemed clear. Their territory, their privacy, their existence. Jessica gripped my arm. "Ethan, please. I think they'll let us go if you give it to them." I looked down at my phone, the holy grail of cryptozoology, irrefutable evidence of Sasquatch existence, then back at the circle of massive beings surrounding us. Their stance wasn't threatening now, but the power in their bodies was evident. They could tear us apart in seconds. "What if I just delete the video?" I suggested, holding up the phone so they could see the screen. "Look, I'll erase it. You can watch me do it." The lead Sasquatch tilted its head, observing as I accessed the gallery and highlighted the video file. "You can't," Mark hissed. "That footage is worth our lives?" I cut him off. As my finger hovered over the delete button, the leader made a new gesture. It raised a hand to its chest, then extended it toward us. The movement was repeated by the others. "I think," Ali said slowly, "I think they're showing gratitude." I pressed delete, watching as the most valuable footage in cryptozoology history disappeared forever. For good measure, I showed them the gallery again, now empty. The tension in the air immediately shifted. The Sasquatches relaxed their posture, and the leader made a sweeping gesture toward a narrow gap between 2 of them, a path to continue downstream. "They're letting us go," Jessica breathed. As we cautiously moved toward the opening, the leader approached me. I froze as it reached toward my face with a finger the size of a sausage. Gently, with surprising delicacy, it touched my forehead, then its own, a connection, an understanding. We passed through the gap, and none of the creatures moved to follow. At a bend in the stream, I glanced back to see them still watching us, their massive forms now partially obscured by morning mist. "Did that really just happen?" Mark asked once we were well away. "They're intelligent," Ali said, "far more than anyone has ever suggested. They weren't just animals. They understood what the phone meant." Jessica looked at me. "You did the right thing deleting it, did I?" I wondered aloud. "Nobody will ever believe us now." 4 hours later, we stumbled into the ranger station, telling a sanitized version of our story. We'd been spooked by bears, ran, and lost our gear. They sent out a team to recover our abandoned campsite while we waited for transportation back to civilization. That evening, as we sat in a motel room still processing our experience, Ali suddenly grabbed my phone. "You clever bastard," she said, a smile spreading across her face as she navigated through the settings. "What?" Jessica asked. Ali turned the phone toward us. "He didn't actually delete the video. He just moved it to the recently deleted folder. She looked at me. You have 30 days before it's permanently gone. I took the phone back, staring at the thumbnail of the recovered video. I had to keep it, I admitted. It's too important. So what now? Mark asked. Release it? Go public? I thought of that moment in the valley, the gentleness of the creature's touch, the clear intelligence in its eyes. I remembered the gesture it had made, connecting us. These weren't mindless beasts. They were sentient beings who had managed to live alongside us for centuries without discovery. No, I said finally. We keep their secret. What? Mark looked incredulous. That footage would make us famous. It would rewrite scientific understanding and bring every cryptid hunter, government agent, and trophy seeker into their home. I countered. They showed us mercy. We owe them the same. In the silence that followed, Jessica reached over and pressed the permanently delete button on my phone. The video vanished forever. I'll always know what I saw, she said quietly. That's enough. We made a pact that night to keep the truth to ourselves. The world wasn't ready, and the Sasquatch deserved their privacy. Sometimes, at night, I still hear those vocalizations in my dreams. Complex, melodic, structured. Language, I'm certain of it now. And on the rare occasions when I venture back into the mountains, I feel eyes watching me from the deep forest. They're out there, a parallel civilization living in the shadows of our world. Intelligent, ancient, hidden, and they're safer that way. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.